Perfect. All right. So, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on and giving our audience some time. For everyone, Brandon knows by far the most about how to execute freelance projects, especially if they're high complexity. So, super excited to have you. Super excited you to enlighten the audience. And yeah, first off, thank you. Do you just want to give a little background on yourself for everyone?
Yeah, sure. So I worked at a company called Gigster. They were based in Silicon Valley. They had an investment from Andreessen Horowitz and Breadpoint, and the company was built around creating freelance talent, and then building teams and doing large-scale enterprise projects. And so at one point they had over 1,000 freelancers, and I was a salesperson on the team, and I led a lot of their large accounts. And so I think a lot of my experience comes from that specifically.
Awesome. So, why do companies hire freelancers? Why don't they just stick to full-time employees or agencies?
Um, a few reasons. I would just say access to talent that's remote is probably number one. Just new skills that they don't have internally. Um, I'd say speed to ramp is probably one of the biggest reasons why they would pick a freelancer over like a consultancy, or even like hiring somebody. It's much faster just to get a freelancer and they can work within a week or two, rather than hire a consultancy or try to hire a full-time employee. Certainly a cheaper short-term investment versus hiring somebody. No recruiting, no cost of hiring, no benefits. So of course, a freelancer should be paid more because of that. But it's certainly a cheaper short-term investment. And I would say that one of the biggest reasons they hire freelancers is actually when they don't know if I would call it like an unknown investment, they call it, a lot of people call it innovation projects, meaning they're not sure if they want to invest in this project or technology that much yet. So they hire an innovation team or freelancers to do a project, and then based on the results, they might decide whether they want to keep doing that with freelancers or if they want to hire internally. So I would say those are like the biggest reasons why companies hire freelancers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what are some of the most memorable and impressive freelance projects you've worked on?
Yeah. So when you say worked on, I'll just clarify. I'm a salesperson, so I help sell it, but I certainly am not smart enough to work on these projects. But yeah, so some of the projects that I got to oversee or just watch happen at Gigster. One was a computer vision project where we analyzed both satellite and drone images using computer vision and evaluated roof damage, either rain or hail or whatever damage. And the results either came through a web application or an iPad application. And that required a team of like six, some really intelligent machine learning developers, product managers, designers, and it all, I think we did that project in 6 months. So pretty impressive timeline and result. Another project, and so there's I would consider that to be, going back to the first question, an innovation project, meaning it's for a large enterprise, really interesting idea, but not sure that they want to invest in that. So it's not like that application immediately went into production for them. It was just something they wanted to test, see how well it worked, and then based on that, maybe they decide to build a team internally around that type of tech. And then the second project that I'll explain, this is like a core application for an enterprise. So really impressive enterprise company in the US. We built an iOS, Android web application. We basically were their product team. So product managers, designers, developers, architects, the whole list of team members that you would need to build a product. And we built an application on all three platforms, and it launched in 15 plus countries and had supported multiple languages, and had over 100,000 downloads. And so those are two very different types of projects. And the second one I would put in the bucket of, they were in an area of the US where it was very hard to find good talent. So the first one was really an innovation project, and the second one was access to really good talent. So I'd say those are the two different types of needs that an enterprise might have.
And where were some of the freelancers? And by the way, I vividly remember watching you run the Jira board. And so you might say sales, but you were literally project managing. So kudos. But where were some of these freelancers sitting?
Yeah, so what was great about Gigsters is we didn't care where people were located. Meaning, if you were in Japan or Europe or Silicon Valley, it really didn't matter. We evaluated people based on skills, and we paid everybody the same. And so it really didn't matter. And so what that did is it actually uncovered a lot of really talented people all around the world. And so we had freelancers in Japan working on projects. We had people in Europe. And what was great is like they were completely willing to work on whatever time the client was working on. So as long as we could set like a 2-hour window where there was overlap, where everybody could be on Slack at the same time, that was really the only requirement we would have for freelancers that were not based in the same area as the customer. And so whenever we got a customer's time zone, we would use that to evaluate the freelancers, and not single people out and say you can't work on this project, but at least make sure that they're okay with working 2-hour overlaps with the rest of the team at least.
Gotcha. And what were some of the things you'd say were critical to the success of those projects? Because I mean, like we mentioned, right, you can have over 20 freelancers in a team, all these different continents. So what were some of those main drivers of success?
Yeah, I would say the first one is just like clear expectations with the client. Um, this is the hardest thing to actually like write down on paper. It's never going to be perfect. If you worked within an enterprise and you were doing a project and everybody worked for that company, expectations still are hard to set. Like and so imagine having freelancers all around the world working on a project where they're not in the same place and they don't work for the same company and have the same email. It's extremely difficult to set expectations. Which brings me to the next point, which would be like having a good relationship with the client. And so if you can have those two things, that I think those are obviously really important to success. In terms of skills that I would say for a team, I think that every single project, if it's like a full project, definitely needs a lead product manager, and definitely needs a lead architect. And ideally, those two people are both working with a client at least once a week. And so I think those are two, and maybe a third one would be a lead designer. But if those three people are working with the client every week, then I think communication can be high and success can be high. What are some other ones? I would say on the client side, if there isn't somebody who's technical, or somebody that has product management experience, or at least project management experience, it makes it extremely difficult to communicate with them. It's just, I'm sure every freelancer has dealt with this at some point. If you don't have someone on the other side that understands what you're going through or what you're dealing with or what's like blocking you, it makes it extremely hard for you to communicate and like come to some agreement. And so I think that's honestly the biggest thing that got in the way of some of Gigster's project success, is that we were communicating with clients that had never built an app before, or had no experience like with how to use Jira. So if they don't know how to use Jira, or they don't know how to use InVision, or they don't know how like product decisions should be made, or like what it means to be lean, or what it means to have an MVP, all those terms make it really hard for you to work with a client if there's not that like clear understanding of what building software actually means.
I wonder, so what were some of the strategies that you personally used? Because I've seen them in action, and if you don't say them, then I'll make sure I clarify like the incredible things I've seen you do to maintain expectations and really help the client. But what were some of the things that you did to mitigate when you have a non-technical client that they're not using the Jira. What were some strategies there?
Yeah, I would, one thing is just like training. I wouldn't call it training because I don't want the client to think that I'm like trying to teach them something that they don't already know. But the reality is like, it's very obvious, I bet, even for freelancers, when they're speaking to a client within like the first 30 minutes, you'll know what type of skill level they are. And it's not a problem. It's just, there's certain terms that they need to know. There's certain tools that they need to learn. And so what we would do is, if we were going to set up Jira and Confluence, and we would try to make it very clear, I would go through every page in Confluence and be like, here's where we're going to track these things. Here's where all of your Jira tickets are going to be. Here's what a Jira ticket is. Here is the one like very common thing is like, here's the difference between a feature and a bug. That's obviously like one of the most complicated things towards the end of a project is they think something is a feature issue and you think it's a bug or whatever. So that's obviously a common one. And I would say those are like the two biggest things you can do is if you, whatever tool you're using to document and communicate with the client and track things, just make sure they understand how that works. And I would say even if they are an intelligent client, or they have a lot of experience in software, you probably should still do that, because every product manager, wherever they grew up, wherever they learned their skills, they probably were using different tools, a little bit different terminology, and everybody has their own flavor of product management. So I would definitely say that it actually doesn't matter how skilled the client is in software. It's worth going through that with them.
Awesome. So, and I think this might be the crowd favorite question, but what are some of the most impressive things you've seen an individual freelancer do?
Oh man, this is a really hard one for me to answer because every project at Gixxer was a team project. So it's hard to delineate what an individual did. I can think of a few scenarios where I just know people like just spent ungodly hours. There's one freelancer at Gixxer that I would say there's at least 15 freelancers at Gixxer that had full-time jobs, but also I know we're working over 40 hours on a freelance project. And that's insane to me. Like, maybe they were neglecting their full-time job. Like, I don't know that part of it, but I know that they were working extremely hard on Gixxer projects. And for completely different reasons. Some would just wanted extra money. Some just like legitimately loved doing both, and wanted to do interesting projects in parallel to their work, or felt like they were gaining new skills by being a freelancer as well. Some legitimately just needed to support their family, so they were just doing both. I think that was one of the most impressive things that I've seen. Another freelancer was working on 3 projects with Gixxer, probably I would say 60 hours every week, but also was on call 24/7 for one of the projects that we had maintenance for. So he was, whenever there was an issue, he was the one who got called, and then he was also working 50 to 60 hours. So certainly a lot of like really hard working freelancers. It's really hard, like I said, it's really hard for me to pinpoint like a project or something that a result, because usually that was a team effort. But certainly a lot of hard workers.
You know, it's interesting. What actually kind of just hit me was in running those projects, a lot of the impressiveness happened before. So I'll never forget when clients would be so amazed by how hyper relevant some of these freelancers were. So it wasn't necessarily what they did in the execution. It was what they'd done prior to put themselves in the right position. So I'll never forget, like we had a client, the freelancer was in New Zealand, had worked on gaming and crypto, and they were just the perfect fit. And so that ability to be hyper relevant is crazy. So, okay, last real question. How can an individual freelancer best position themselves to be part of projects like this?
Yeah, I would say that it's really hard to get interesting projects or large projects unless you have like a collective set of people that you trust, that you can call on and have a team. Most large projects take more than one person. most companies that are looking for a solution, which could be using freelancers, it could be using a consultancy, they don't want to have to like create that for themselves. They don't want to have to find 5 different freelancers and then have them talk to each other and see if they can work well together. So if you're a product manager, then you certainly need a designer and an architect at least to get a project started. So you should at least have those 2 people. If you want to have like a real collective, then you need like a skill in like the top 6 things, which would be like design, product, architecture, backend, web, iOS, Android. You should at least have those. And you should have like maybe even a company or somebody that you trust that does QA. And so like at a minimum, you should have at least one person that you can trust in each of those. So then when someone comes to you and says like, hey, we have a project that spans 3 platforms, then you certainly have at least one person that you trust. I would say that another one is make it easy to work with you. I don't really know how to describe that, like, or put that into like bullet points, but it's just like, it's make it easy to work for you, or work with you. And I would say the last one is like being a freelancer. It's really easy. Like I work from home right now, but I'm wearing a collared shirt. Be professional and look professional. Like it definitely helps, at least at first. Like it's okay to wear a t-shirt and do whatever you want once you have the job, but you're still interviewing. I think people forget that when they're freelancers is like, look, you're still interviewing for a job here. You don't have the job. And you wouldn't walk into an interview wearing a t-shirt, or like having a bunch of noise going on in the background. So just try to at least look or act professional when it's important, because the client, I don't think the client cares what you wear or how you look in most settings. But when you're in an interview, I think they're expecting to see like, can this person act professional in case I need to put them in front of somebody that is maybe a superior to me, you know? And so I think in certain settings, it is certainly important to have that. So maybe like the first or second call. And so I would say those are the biggest ones.
That's a huge point. It's not necessarily the person you're working with, but the person above them that they have to impress, and if they bring you onto a call,
Totally.
that's huge. And for the record, I put this on just for you. I haven't
Yeah.
worn it.
My boss is waiting around the corner just in case.
Exactly. Okay, you have 3 lightning questions. You ready?
Yeah.
Best Atlanta fast food restaurant.
Chick-fil-A.
Yep. Favorite book?
I don't read books.
Okay, last one. Favorite animal?
Rhino.
Nice. That fits you very well, actually. Okay, summary: rhino that doesn't read books that loves Chick-fil-A. All right, bud. Thanks for coming on.